Does manual treasury management and operations have your crypto business stuck in the slow lane? Scale up and speed ahead with Fireblocks, the #1 platform for crypto operations and trading pros that makes custody, settlement, and rebalancing quick and easy. Visit fireblocks.com to learn more. I'd like to also thank Kraken. With Kraken, you can instantly buy and sell over 50 of the most popular cryptocurrencies or earn additional rewards through their industry-leading staking service. Payouts are twice a week and you can earn up to 20% each year. Visit kraken.com/scoop to learn more. Eager to make more informed decisions around crypto using data you can trust? Chainalysis demystifies cryptocurrency by providing industry-leading compliance, market intelligence, and investigation support for all crypto assets for organizations like Gemini, Crypto.com, and BlockFi. Maximize your potential with the leading blockchain data platform by visiting Chainalysis.com now. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Scoop. I'm your host, Frank Chaparro, Director of News at The Block. We have Franklin Fitch joining us again. He's the Head of Growth and Marketing at Parallel NFT. And we have an artist joining us as well, Dave Krugman. He's an artist in the NFT world. Gentlemen, there's obviously a lot going on in the space. Before we dive in, thank you for joining us. Thanks for the laughs before we turned on the mics. I was eating some melons. Franklin was getting a little too excited about Fed Chair Jerome Powell, be that as it may. I guess the one thing that's been interesting, first off, Franklin, crazy just how much Parallel has kind of taken off since you first joined us. I feel like it was kind of like almost kind of in the background of our conversation last time, but now it's like captured the zeitgeist of this market. Everyone's really excited about it. 6 months ago, I was kind of like, oh, all right, yeah, card thing, all right. But now it's huge, or huge relative to the space at least. But let's just sort of maybe do some reflecting. How surprised are you guys at the growth we're seeing of this market?
Not surprised. I think that Dave and I have very similar views on the market, and understanding kind of what led us here. I think what's interesting, and one of the things that we'll probably focus on in this conversation, is the growth of what I would call the lowest common denominator, right? Which is the mass appeal PFP collectibles, right? And there's so much more than NFTs are and can be, but that's what has kind of taken mainstream hold. I think we just had Paris Hilton on Jimmy Fallon, promoting some NFTs, specifically some Bored Apes, and that's the kind of thing that seems to be most talked about, for better or for worse. So I think the kind of universal relatability of a profile picture and this massive celebrity push, for getting NFTs and talking about NFTs on the timeline has kind of really accelerated the growth curve for the industry. But in many ways, I think we're still nascent, and there's a lot to be built, and there's a lot of connections to be made within the industry, and certain technologies need to progress. So I'm not surprised with the overall trend. I think in some ways we're maybe a little bit ahead of where I would have expected us to be. In some ways we're a little bit behind, but overall I think net we're about at where I would have expected us to be in terms of just global awareness. Kind of need the user base to grow though. That's what I think is really lagging behind. We have this huge pool of awareness, but if you actually look at the data in terms of users, active users of NFTs, I think we're not quite where I'd like us to be.
And that might be a derivative of the underpinning infrastructure that allows people to onboard into this world, right? The
Yeah.
on ramps aren't necessarily where they should be. Dave, this is a really interesting opportunity for people in your field of work. The PFPs have become kind of like the dominant, um, you know, aspect of this space. And I think a lot of people look at that and they think, well, geez, like how much is actually going into that? It's kind of stupid, right? It's just a picture of an ape and sometimes they have a hat or they don't have a hat, and they have sunglasses sometimes, and they're worth millions of dollars. But th- this is kind of a more technical question. How much work actually goes into, like, as an artist, into creating some of these things? And we might look at it as being like, oh, okay, like how hard is it to make like 1,000 apes? But maybe it is difficult. Maybe it is a thorny process and takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears as an artist, or maybe it doesn't. I don't know. I've never
Yeah,
asked that question before.
I mean, and my assumption is that it does take a lot of work to make a successful project. I think we're kind of in a market right now where uh, like almost anything is selling. Like there's like jokes and memes about how difficult it is to get on an allow list to mint. Like you have to jump through all these hoops and all these obstacle courses. So I think the level of art that you have to be to sell out is actually a pretty low bar. But I think that looking back from the future, the projects that actually are still around are going to be the ones where the most effort went into the art itself, but also into the community and the economics behind those communities. I think the projects that are thriving right now are ones that are kind of introducing token models and other kind of utility, like cool cats and apes with the coins and stuff like that. So I don't want to say that it's not artistically impressive, although I think some projects are definitely just cash grabs. Um, but it's to me, it's less about the specific art and more about this idea of community building and belonging. And I think what these projects are so effective at doing is tapping into our kind of evolutionary tendencies. Like Bored Apes is a great example of something I'd call just like modern tribalism, where you want to signal that you're in that you belong to this culture, and it really does take advantage of the environment in which we evolved. We're kind of still behaviorally locked into that time, even though the world that we exist in is much more technologically advanced. And I think what we're seeing in this frothy era right now is just like a perfect psychological attack on certain tendencies that we all have as human beings. And so that's really interesting. I do hope that a lot of this profit being generated, and we're seeing people just make absurd amounts of wealth trading these projects. I do hope that some of those resources flow towards artists who are really using the technology in interesting ways and pushing the boundaries forward, because again, like we've both said, there's so much more depth to the technology of NFTs than just these PFP projects that are so popular right now.
Mm. I mean, in a sense, Franklin, you're kind of creating a modern tribe leveraging NFTs, but also, a sort of game experience. How important is the art relative to like what the NFTs can do? Are they equally important? How would you sort of describe or delineate what is important in building this sort of tribe that you're creating?
Well, for us, the art is essential. It's absolutely one of the pillars that we rest on. Maybe the pillar that we rest on at Parallel. But I think in general in the market, um, it's early, and there's a lot of reflexivity in terms of just seeing the way that trends are going, and kind of appreciating Dave's point about utility kind of is getting the premium, or the social signaling, or the tribalism. That's just the way that it is right now. The PFPs, I think, are um, comparably easy to deploy to what we're doing. And so the fact of how many of them can kind of be generated, the fact that the market is liquid and is putting a premium on these things, and we're seeing the interest in collecting them, and we're seeing certain projects like a Board Apes, getting mainstream awareness, and genuine mainstream awareness, kind of being universally recognizable almost at this point. I think that is maybe kind of drawing more attention away, from art as a whole in the market. But I think we're going to move back. I think we're going to kind of snap back to the mean there, because where did the NFT space start? And if we remember back to our last conversation, it started with art, pure art, I guess you would call it. not saying that, PFPs aren't art, but I think that they're intentionally something else, right?
Yeah.
They are that club, they are that community, they are that social signal, and that's what they're there for, and that's not wrong, but it can be derivative, right? It can come off as cheap, and I think to the layperson who doesn't understand NFTs, they look at that and they kind of have this animosity towards that because it feels maybe cheap or derivative to them, right? The fact of the matter is, PFPs often require significant amounts of work, as Dave alluded to, and they have this really interesting thing, in terms of online tribalism, associated with them, and that's a really fascinating trend, and I think, going to continue to be very important in the world. But um, I would like to see, and I believe that we will see a harken back to art being, the core pillar of what NFTs are about. Because as Dave and I can both attest, because we've seen it firsthand, NFTs radically transform the artist relationship with the market. And that's kind of what it's all about at the end of the day. There's a few core theses to why this has been so transformative in such a short period of time. That's one of them. The other one, which we'll talk about, is NFTs being keys, which we did speak on last time. But I think that's what we're in this evolutionary phase moving towards, is really getting full fruition of those core pillars of what NFTs have really been about, and why they're transformative. And that's, again, changing the relationship that the artists have with the market, and, being this really versatile key to physical and online experiences. And that can be as simple as the social signaling and the tribalism that we talked about. That's a key into that kind of an experience, that feeling of belonging. It can be a key into something as simple as patronage of an artist that you like, or it can be many, many other, more complex and nuanced things. So, like in our example, um, the game, the fact that it's a literal game, and there's this whole economic system alongside the game, it has so much potential. Just like any early technology, you think of early internet, it wasn't advanced or impressive. It was a network of, governments and universities, sending very simple messages to each other. And look at what it is now. So I think NFTs will kind of follow that same trajectory. Right now, it is kind of by definition a lowest common denominator thing that's really taking off at being the PFP collectibles. But I believe that will change,
Yeah.
and I hope it changes, because I understand and appreciate why the layperson may feel jaded about NFTs when they see the monkeys selling for $1 million. I get it. I can appreciate that.
Yeah, but on the other side of the coin, a lot of these monkeys are being lost, and people are giving out their seed phrases. So
Yeah.
it's not for the faint of heart. I want to talk to
No, this is true.
to Dave about how the relationship between the artist and those patrons changes with NFTs. But I want to focus on this idea of modern tribalism, because I think that a lot of what these NFT based communities are, or what they represent, is something that is very inherent to humanity, but even more specifically to the internet, right? I was listening to a podcast with the founder of Reddit, Alexis, and he was mentioning how when people go up to him, or when he meets people, they won't say their name first. They'll say, hi, I'm a 10-year Redditor, or
Yeah.
however many years they've been using Reddit. And it illustrates that connection to that Reddit community. And there's no ownership there. They didn't have a token 10 years ago, and that connection is still super powerful. So when you think about like building any community, adding these layers of, I don't know if incentives the right word, but these layers of connection and maybe incentives just can make it more powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my whole thesis in this space really is this idea of our environment of evolution. We spent many tens of thousands of years in a very specific environment. And in that environment, it was, to our advantage to be tribal. And it was, we were hunter gatherers. We were constantly scanning, looking for patterns, and gathering resources in order to bring back and strengthen our communities for harder times. Um, and it like that's all reflected right now. I mean, technology, the history of what we consider technology, moving past the basic technologies, is a couple hundred years old, and we know that the scale of evolution moves much more slowly. So we're actually operating on behavioral patterns that were programmed into us for much, much longer than the technologies that we're expressing them in. So basically, I just look at this space as like the digital savannah. We're all just kind of in this new wilderness together, and we're still acting on our instincts, which are to kind of um, find a sense of belonging, find utility, find patterns, and find ways to signal our relationships with each other. And particularly for artists and patrons, just to touch on that as well, this is really the first time in history where it's been so frictionless to be a patron of an artist. And it's really one of the only times in history where the communications networks and layers between those communities of patrons and communities of artists are just at our fingertips. Previously, even in like the as late as 10 years ago, if I wanted to be an artist and have a community of collectors, that relationship is probably being middleman at many different levels. On a communications level, it was probably gated between galleries, and galleries were very protective of their collector bases. But now I have access to a completely almost frictionless global market where I can reinforce the relationships within my communities every single day. And I actually think that because this space is pushing us closer to those behaviors that we evolved, to optimize for, we're actually like, there's a lot of joy and relief. I was getting interviewed for a super rare feature, and one of the questions that Nathan Beer asked me was, "What do you say to people who are like, that you're doing something very risky and very out of the norm, and why don't you get a 9 to 5 and do something really stable? Um, why don't you do something normal?" And that got me thinking. I'm like, what's normal about going to the same fluorescent lit office, like for 60 hours a week, seeing the same exact people in an environment that is extremely foreign to me as a human being. And I just feel like a lot of the artists who are embracing this technology are kind of opening their eyes to a much more natural way for them to live as creative individuals, and a more community-based ecosystem that we were actually did optimize for. I think that in the past 100 years, we've been kind of shoehorned into systems that are very foreign to us, and I think we've just kind of got it wrong. And I hope that these technologies, both NFTs and cryptocurrencies, can help us get back to that more like it takes a village mentality, where we can all contribute in our own unique and useful ways to make a healthier society. Because these systems, I think, have created a mental health crisis, to say the least, um, with numbers for depression and anxiety are just off the charts. And even despite recent setbacks like the pandemic, I mean, we've been on a downward trend with all this stuff for a long, long time. So my hope for these technologies is that, especially for the artists, and
It just brings some joy to people's lives.
yeah, and for the artists, it's like, we we gravitate towards systems that are much less rigid. And if there's a way that we can do that and kind of build these living ecosystems and support systems and symbioses, then I think it's going to be a much better experience for everybody involved.
I think for the number of people who find joy, or for whom NFTs spark joy in them, there are just as many people, or at least a loud grouping of people, who think that they are antithetical to the good life, or just to a sort of, to use your word, normal society. Right? They're bad for the environment. They add incentives that take away from the good-hearted fun of art and games. They kind of make it all about money, although we can get into art and video games always having been about money. But let's maybe unpack that, right? There are a lot of people, especially in the gaming community. I don't know if this is so much the case in the art community, because the art community has always been about profiteering, and big patrons and the rest. But there are a lot of folks in the gaming community who have been led to think that NFTs are just bad for their industry. How do you tackle that perception every time there's a big announcement by, I think Steam is the poster child of this? They came out and made an announcement about getting into NFTs, and they just got brutalized. Why do you think that is? And does it go away?
Yeah, I'll quickly touch on I've distilled this down into like a sentence I like to say, and then I'll pass to Franklin. But change is really hard, and it's much easier to say something is stupid, dangerous, or hurtful than it is to completely rewrite your understanding of the world. This is a technology that is fundamentally going to change the way that we connect and operate with each other. And it's a lot. It took me months, and I'm a pretty technologically savvy person. It took me months to fully understand the implications of what's happening here. Um, for the average person, it is so much easier to take the path of least resistance and just join the mob and be like, "This is stupid. I don't want to learn something." And but like the undertone of that is, I don't want to learn something new. And a lot of the criticisms you see on these dog piles on Twitter, where everyone's piling on, and it's mob mentality. A lot of, if you look at their arguments, they're just reciting headlines from clickbait articles that have been endlessly recycled for the past year. And if their criticisms were, there are a lot of problems and unsolved issues within the NFT space, and if that's the stuff that they were mad about, I'd be a lot more convinced that they were arguing in good faith. But a lot of it is just um, fundamental resistance to change, which is again something that we evolved to optimize for. It used to be very dangerous to accept new things. So yeah, I'll pass to Franklin because I know he has some great thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there, and I kind of want to unpack a little bit more of the why. Why do these people have animosity towards NFTs? Well, I think if you look at the gaming industry, that is an industry where gaming publishers have historically exploited their audience, right? I mean, in modern times, and so I think that that leads to trepidation about new things, that is amplified from the natural tendency that Dave spoke about. Like, there's even greater fear of change because the last few changes, you look at loot boxes and things like that, are a borderline scam. They're it's kind of uh, valueless. They have very limited value in a closed ecosystem. Um, so that is the concern I think that they have is this is an extension of that, because I think they see, again, the primary examples of NFTs they see are the monkey pictures selling for millions of dollars. It seems lowbrow, it seems impossible to really fathom, it seems like a pyramid scheme. So I think that that's the tendency that they have, is to say, well, especially if gaming publishers are now getting into it, it can't be a good thing. When in reality, uh, when in reality, the I think the truth of it is you're essentially giving people the power back, right? You're saying these closed loop ecosystems, they are now opened, right? So I can have assets that are going to be fluid and move around between different ecosystems. And you're saying that I can have immediate resale value on an open liquid market. You're saying that I can actually have provenance for my asset. You're saying that the asset is not essentially controlled by a centralized entity that may, willfully and infinitely print more of it and devalue it. So you're kind of disrupting a lot of the power that gaming companies as centralized institutions have historically had over their users with this technology. And I understand that people, in the gaming community often have a misunderstanding as well about the open world, open metaverse concept.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's an ambitious but really really cool future. One of the things that we're doing at Parallel is making all of our AR objects compatible with different metaverses. So we essentially want you to be able to view and appreciate and be part of the parallel universe, no matter which one of these online worlds you're a part of. And so I think that's a really cool concept to me as a gamer. Like, I love that. What is one of the things that gamers are always seeking? Immersiveness. I want to be lost in the game world. And if you give me the potential to take my game assets and have them essentially anywhere in these online worlds that I want, that increases the immersiveness by a huge factor. So I think there's a lot of actually benefit. It's the caged bird learns to love their cage at a certain point, and it's frustrating, but it is the way that it is. And I think once the technology becomes more usable, once we kind of harken back to what makes NFTs good and transformative, not just the lowest common denominator PFP stuff, and show more examples of that. How can NFTs be used for good, right? Like we just did a charity auction. We want to put more examples of that out to the world rather than just the derivative, monkey pictures necessarily. I think that's what we have to do. That's the onus is on us as an industry to show more examples of how this changes lives, right? I've publicly said, like, if a DAO existed for this, I would pitch a whole bunch of ETH at it, and I'm serious, right? Like, we need more examples publicly of this stuff doing good for people. And if we have that, I think, we start to change the narrative more proactively rather than just wait for it to happen, which it will. But I don't want to wait. I want people to know why this is special because it is. And I genuinely believe that. Dave can attest, like we've seen it radically change people's lives for the better. And these are creators.
Have you been able to evangelize gamers to Parallel who are very anti crypto NFTs, and maybe you kind of showed them the proverbial light?
Yes, yes, I have, but it's limited cases, right? We don't necessarily encounter those people that often with our circles of influence yet. We certainly will as we approach the game launch, and I'm preparing mentally and in terms of material to tackle that challenge. But I think much of that work will be done for us by the force of time. But at the same time, my own peers. The way that I would characterize the market is that there are, like you said earlier, very loud voices in two different camps, but they're relatively small camps. There's very loud pro NFT, there's very loud anti NFT. The vast majority of people in the world don't give a shit. They don't care, and they probably could be made to care quite easily. They're not dug into a position necessarily, which makes it harder to unentrench them, so to speak. They're just kind of going about their day to day lives and have really no interface with NFTs. So making the technology easier to use, showing people how cool it is and how it can not only make them money but give them access to really amazing experiences and enfranchise them. I think if we can do that, then this mass of people that are kind of waiting on the sidelines will be tilted in favor, not against. And so my own peers, who I talk to day in and day out, my friends, have loved Parallel. you know, they're like, this is amazing. This is so cool. Like these cards are sick. Like the art is awesome. The game sounds great. Oh, and they go up in value somehow. Like what is going on here? Like this is crazy. It kind of blows their mind. So most of the conversations I have are like that, actually. They're not with people who are anti NFT, they're with people who are like, okay, that sounds great, you know?
There's also an incredible amount of artists who are anti NFT as well, and I think it's the same thing. It's this kind of they're comfortable with Web two. A lot of them are very entrenched in Web two, like Instagram, and kind of trained to expect that they need to give their content away for free with no ability to monetize it. But it just reminds me of I was very early to Instagram. I started doing it in like 2012, 2013, and I was a beneficiary of network effect, in that layer of the internet. And I got to tell you, it's the same chorus with the same intensity of hate. And 9 out of 10 photographers in 2013 were teasing me and making fun of me and saying, "You're going to give your photos away on the internet for free?" Like, no, and like some people were watermarking their work as if that was some way to preserve the value of it. And I really just understood that we were living through a paradigm shift. And that paradigm was the decentralization of media, right? And I recognized that what that meant was, the gatekeepers would suffer, and the people that were willing to adopt new distribution technologies would thrive. And because I made that early bet, I was able to have an entire career on Instagram where, it changed my life. It allowed me to become the artist I am today. And so when I see technology like this, that is, I would say 100 times more paradigm shifting than Web two, um, I run towards it. And the more of the chorus of hate I hear, the louder that is, the higher the signal of success is, because I just know that the more something disrupts and changes the way that the world works, the more of that like percentage of hatred you have to dip into, unfortunately. But if you can kind of fade the herd and really have conviction and believe in this technology, it's still early enough to have that network effect that I was so lucky to catch in the early days of social media. The other thing about the hate too, just real quickly, is everyone's complaining about the environmental cost of blockchains, and it's just like, if you ask them, oh, did you audit your participation in the petroleum economy, or like the conflict minerals in your iPhone, and they're like, well, that's not relevant. I'm like, it kind of is, because if you're going to audit my one mint on super rare, and tell me that I'm burning down the rainforest, you better take a good hard look at the systems that you participate in, because most of those systems are much more damaging. Yeah, they're much more damaging to
particularly the dollar. Look at the dollar.
The dollar is a great example. And those systems, I mean, I think that these technologies are actually the thing that can kind of break those old systems and eventually put us on a path towards more sustainable energy and sustainability. So I don't mean to get into like whataboutism, but it's just ridiculous as a criticism that artists and people making incredible games like Parallel are the target of so much vitriol when where's this energy when I don't see people throwing this type of stuff at McDonald's on a daily basis, or like ExxonMobil. Yeah,
it's below their line.
Right.
It's below their line.
Or Tesla. It's below their line. That is, by the way, the wildest moment I've seen in recent memory. That I couldn't even fathom that. No, I mean, even like Tesla, right? People, assume Elon is this sort of, benevolent figure, and only that. He's using cryptocurrency. That's interesting in and of itself. But, how are Tesla batteries made? Do people ever look into that, right? Extremely destructive practices there. So you have to assume that there's an energy cost. I love the way Arthur Hayes writes about this, right? The energy cost of value, and what is tied up in that. And cryptocurrency is a fundamental new way to imagine those systems. If you actually did really robust research on the environmental cost of using the dollar, right? For one, ink on paper, okay, that's the medium by which you're transmitting value. Tell me that's sustainable in the first place. It's not. Second, you have essentially this massive war machine and economic engine, that really prioritizes and rewards maladaptive, destructive behaviors to the planet. That is what backs the dollar. That's what gives it the value. So it's kind of, it's hilarious to me, I think, when people who, spend 12 hours a day on Discord and YouTube, spend cash dollars, aspire to drive a Tesla, critique other people about their energy usage. It just feels naive, and the hubris is kind of outstanding. It's pretty incredible to me. But I mean, this is the way the world works, right? You have people who cast stones in glass houses, and that's fine. At the end of the day, people like myself and Dave will continue to do what we do because we see the effective altruism, or whatever you want to call it, that is implied by these systems. And we want to try and make the world a better place, and we're curious, and we want to explore. We want to reimagine the relationships that we have with the entities that are involved in our lives, and that's what it comes down to. And no amount of vitriol is going to stop us from doing that.
Having trouble keeping pace with the crypto boom? When your business is scaling up and your portfolio is growing, you don't want to waste precious time on manual treasury management or settling and rebalancing. Fireblocks can handle that for you with smart, scalable solutions for your crypto business, along with industry-leading security and expertise. They'll take care of the back end so you can focus on the big picture. Visit fireblocks.com to learn more. For the last 10 years, Kraken has been known as one of the best platforms for trading crypto online. Now with the new Kraken app, it's easier than ever to buy and sell over 60 of the most popular cryptocurrencies on the go 24/7. Simply download the Kraken app, connect your bank account, and start investing for as little as $10. Just a minute is all it takes to get started. Are you eager to make more informed decisions around crypto using data you can trust? Chainalysis is here to help. Chainalysis demystifies cryptocurrency by providing industry-leading compliance, market intelligence, and investigation support for all crypto assets for organizations like Gemini, Crypto.com, and BlockFi. Gain unparalleled visibility and maximize your potential with the leading blockchain data platform by visiting chainalysis.com now. I mean, there's smart, relevant criticisms and critiques and sanctimonious shade throwing. So you have to sort of figure out where to put your energy and tackle the questions that are sort of asked with curiosity. But when you have artists, I wonder, like, on the artist side, because it is such a hard industry to make it in across verticals, as a content creator, specifically as someone who um, is a graphic designer or a painter. It takes a lot for your work to get noticed, and then for you to be able to monetize that work. I wonder, like, how much of the criticism is rooted in a sort of, like, saltiness. And I don't want to be too hard on artists, but I could imagine, like, seeing people make millions overnight on what seems like a very basic type of collection might kind of rub them
I'm
the
sure
wrong
it
way.
does.
Absolutely. I think that's a really
Yeah,
good
I'm
point,
sure it
honestly.
does.
And look, I mean, it's in the early days of anything, there's a lot of speculation, and people are making huge bets on things that I don't think are going to hold up in terms of, because they're kind of not well thought through and they're not high effort. I think we've already seen that in the art space a lot. But again, another part of this is that a lot of these artists, especially fine artists, it took them a long time to adapt even to social media, right?
Mm,
And now there's breakout fine artists who are, they've built up huge followings on social media, and that's how they finally found their success after years of grinding and learning new technologies. And the ones who successfully adapted to those new realities, and now you're going to them and being like, wait, like, you got to learn the next new thing, and they're like, oh my god, like, I'm so exhausted from learning all this. Like, I just rewrote my understanding of how all this technology works. But that's opportunity always exists at the bleeding edges of new technologies. I mean, silk screening was a new technology. Every artistic medium was a new technology at some point, and at every single moment where there was a new technology, there was that same chorus of haters. Where, when cubism came around and everyone was like, this isn't art, and now we look back at it and we revere these people. It's the
totally.
same pattern. Like, history just is repeating itself ad nauseum. And um of course, there's a lot of terrible cubist art that we don't even know about because it never made it through that filter. But and so we're in that moment now with NFTs where, it's not good because it's an NFT. NFTs are just the underlying technology that enables us to trade artwork, really. And um we're in the period of, like, filtering through what it means and what it is. And the people that will be around are the people that are really pushing the boundaries and doing interesting things with the technology and making great art. It's actually why I'm so bullish on Parallel, is because, not only are they playing in this, like, economics, really interesting economic system, but it's some of the best art in the world as far as I'm concerned.
Our artists are just wow.
Yeah, I mean, they're working with the best 3D artists and artists in general in the space. I mean, the people I've looked up to in gaming and concept art for
Hmm.
years are all, working with Parallel. And so if you can hit that sweet spot of really using the technology as a medium, but also using best in class art to tell those stories and build that lore, and best, the best writing in the game, like, that's how you make big plays that will stand the test of time and can make it through these filters.
I mean, I think that on our end, we thought that NFTs would be a really, really cool way to create a franchise and deliver content, and give people value. It's fundamentally about providing value. That's a really, really core ethos of what we do. And I think to your other point there, Dave, it's like when people say that they hate NFTs, what it sounds to me like is like I hate Canvas, or I hate Adobe. You know what I mean? That's what I hear in my head, because what I understand is what Dave just said. It's a medium, right? Can the medium be misused? Absolutely. Can any medium be misused? Absolutely. Right? You could go make some horrible offensive art on Adobe, right? And that would be a bad thing. But does that mean that the tool itself is a bad thing? I don't believe so.
I've said this before, and it got a lot of laughs in like a Twitter space I was in. But I was like, you go back far enough, and there's a caveman who hated fire.
Yeah.
Like literally, like there's somebody who was like, don't like it.
Nope, too hot, scary.
Don't fuck with that shit.
Yeah.
But also, then if you really want to boil it down to like the earliest form of technology that humanity used, all of these issues are still there, which is that, yeah, fire can save us and literally save our lives on a cold night, but it also can, kill us and burn down our entire environment. So it's like you have to realize that technology is just technology, and the intentions in its use are what make it interesting and make it worth exploring. Because
Hmm.
there are artists that hated canvas. There's most painters hated photography. It took generations for photography to be taken seriously. And as a photographer, I can't imagine having to live through that era where now we live in this intensely visual world where visual literacy is at an all-time high. Every
Yeah.
day there's more images made than the day before, and it's such a beautiful thing. And if we spent all of our time just hating on the newest thing, we would never ever have arrived here. So I'm just thrilled that I didn't fall into any traps of being a luddite about any of it.
Yeah.
I want to just wrap up this point here because, you know, what do cryptocurrency systems do at a fundamental level? They reimagine incentives, right? That's kind of what I would describe it as. And so, can that be used for evil? 1,000%. We see it all the time. What's a rug pull?
Hmm.
That's what it is. And creating this kind of rush to get into something and this FOMO, and then yanking the rug and exiting stage left. And people would say, "Oh, the anonymity is what preserved these criminals," But it's a double-edged sword, like everything, right? Incentive systems can now be empowering. They can empower, creators. They can empower minorities, right, who were historically disenfranchised by the way it used to work. So if you just look at one side of the coin, you're missing the other side of the coin. That's kind of what it comes down to. I think if there was like a summary of this recent, section of conversation, that would be what it is.
Yeah. I mean, even I took a history of the book course in college, and the
Mhm.
printing press had its fair share of haters,
Yep, that's a great
obviously.
example, and I always cite that example. I used to. It's funny. I used to have the same conversations when I was trying to convince photographers to embrace social media. And what the iPhone is it's a printing press for photographers. We can now we have the technology to create and distribute visual information at scale. And it's even more powerful than the printing press because, like, I hate to say a cliche, but a picture is worth 1,000 words. The way that we even read a word is as an image. We read it
Mm.
as a chunk. There's this famous experiment you can Google that, like, Google like a mixed paragraph with mixed up letters in the words. As long as the first and last letter are the same, you can read every word flawlessly if the middle is completely scrambled,
Hmm.
because we actually read in chunks of images and symbols, and not in like the order of which particular letter goes where. And what that means is photos and art are extremely communicative structures of images, and we can convey a tremendous amount of information with just one still frame. So it's really an incredible thing to live through.
It is. I want to focus maybe and just ask a few questions about Parallel. I know that there was a Prime proposal that kind of shared some stuff about the developing infrastructure for game developers to leverage Parallel's assets and services. Can you expand on that? And is Parallel going to allow more card game developers that are to build rather on Parallel, or is it limited to
Hmm.
just card games?
I'm really glad that you clued in on that point because that shows that you understood what the paper was about. Specifically the Echelon paper. It is a vision for GameFi. It's the way that play to earn ecosystems we believe should work, and its implications are between the documentation significantly larger than Parallel itself. So thank you for that because that is the vision and that is what we're trying to achieve here. The idea is that there is an Echelon foundation which will govern, kind of the broader Prime ecosystem. The Prime being, the token and the sort of set of economic systems and smart contracts that will, not only control Parallel, at least, the incentive portion of Parallel and the community organization and governance. But we believe it will do the same thing for other games too, and that is the intention. Was to create a macro structure that can essentially galvanize proper, play to earn and GameFi systems. And I also think probably play to earn is a bit of a misnomer because, we have some commentary on that too. We want it to be win to earn. I think that play to earn is as you know a kind of unilateral system really really interesting, but it's not enough. I think it creates stagnance in the game itself. You essentially don't want a game where you can just grind and get coins and that's it. That's not an interesting gaming experience. That's not a game that I want to play. You know, it is fundamentally a really really powerful model though,
Hmm.
right? We've already seen how certain games doing this have transformed the gaming landscape just from that. But I think if you take it a step further and you have really really interesting win to earn mechanics, now you've created something that's compelling, right? Because what you're essentially doing is you're incentivizing competition and organization, which are essential elements of a great gaming experience. So TLDR, yeah, that's what it's all about. It's laying out a set of incentives, a set of economic systems, driven by smart contracts, driven by the blockchain, driven by the use of cryptocurrency as a token, really with a utility and governance sort of model to create what we believe is the future of gaming, and Parallel being one iteration of that, but the system having implications beyond Parallel itself.
Let's kind of break that down for the listener for a second. I think someone might hear when to earn and think Caesars or some gambling outfit.
Yeah, okay, I appreciate that point. Yeah.
What it is the difference between idling and earning money while playing a game. I mean, some of these games can be pretty disengaging, right? You're just kind of sitting there and you're earning. But the idea here is to actually accomplish things just like you do in a regular game, and only then do you earn.
hmm Yeah, I mean, it's, because again, it goes back to what are you incentivizing? If you were just kind of standard play to earn, you're essentially incentivizing grinding type behavior, which can over time be botted, and which really creates a stagnant, boring gaming experience. If you're incentivizing victory, what have you done? You've incentivized competitive behavior, which requires social organization, which requires study, which requires refinement, right? That will kind of over time create really, really interesting outcomes in the game itself, because now people are forced to go deeper into the meta,
Hmm.
right? About the kind of game that Parallel is. It's a TCG. So you have all of these cards with all these different effects, all these different ways that you can combine them, many billions of iterations, right? And the intent is to create a strategy that will overwhelm your opponent. And your opponent on their end has, an assemblage of cards to form a strategy with billions of combinations. So to get deeper and to make that game fun, incentivize people to be better, right? To have better assemblages of cards, to be more organized socially, to form what we have termed bonds, which are essentially teams, but we call them bonds because it's more than a team. It's sharing pooled assets, right? It's sharing in wins together and actually receiving, real value. Um, this is what it's all about. And a good example of that is one of our overclock keys. So if you have this key, it participates in a system called keyframing, and you can essentially combine these different keys together to enhance your wins, to essentially boost your earnings. And that's just a way to think creatively about win to earn systems, and that's what a good portion of the Prime document is trying to do is say, hey, let's just go deeper with this concept, right? We think it's a great concept, but it just hasn't been fleshed out. We wanted to create this really intricate, nuanced, and powerful system for incentives to essentially drive excellence in a gaming experience, because that's what it comes back to at the end of the day. We want to create the best game that Web3 has ever seen. Period. End of sentence. That's what it's all about. That's what we're trying to do. In order to do that, you create these smart contract, incentive, economic, and social systems, right? And you do that because what is the outcome? A better gaming experience. What do we want to do when we play games? We want to have our friends there, right? We want to be social. We want to have, competitiveness. We want to have fun. And we believe that the structures and systems outlined in those documents will create a fundamentally more fun and more engaging experience.
There's all this stuff happening in the ecosystem. Parallel's ramping up. There's been tremendous growth across a number of projects, even the ones that aren't as fun. And the money, I mean, I don't want to sound trite, but there is a lot of money sitting on the sidelines that hasn't even gotten in yet in terms of gaming, right?
Hmm.
I think I think a huge focus of FTX's new fund is going to be gaming. They've got $2 billion set aside.
Well, they know what they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So I think this speaks to like how much room there is to grow. Maybe we can think about what we're expecting over the next few months. Maybe we could kick it to Dave. Um, what's the rest of 2020, or what's the first half maybe of 2022 going to look like? Are we going to see, some games, kind of fall into the fall into darkness while others rise? It's still going to be hyper competitive. What are you
The
anticipating?
one thing I'm concerned about with the game side of things, I think there's some very legitimate projects that will be like bigger than what any game that we can imagine at this point in time. I'll get to that in a while, but my main concern is just how much, especially with these PFP projects, like almost every PFP project is like and a game, and I'm like, they have no ability to understand how much money goes into creating a successful AAA title. And they might make a few $1 million off a PFP sale, but I mean, it's just like so many more resources are needed to really develop a working, strong game. That's why I'm so bullish on Parallel in particular, because they're doing it right, and you know the slow build to something really beautiful, I think, is the way to go here. Um, the other point I'd like to make about NFTs and games is like, think of, I don't know this number off the top of my head, but think of how big the gaming industry is already, right? And it's almost like an extractive system or like a parasitic system on us, because it's eating it's eating huge amounts of time from people, which is value, right? What's more valuable than time? And it's just completely a one-sided relationship. Like the people who are playing these games, typically, unless what are the chances you're going to be a pro gamer, right? Considering the the amount of people playing these games, um, the amount of people who are not making any extracting any value from the amount of hours they're putting into these games is astounding. Yet the industry is thriving more than ever. So if you can close the gap and think the way that Franklin's been talking about um, play to earn or win to earn, or I think you were saying, um, if I can play a game that I
Hmm.
love and it's actually a productive use of my time, and I can get some value back out of that, whether it's like trading in-game items in a sanctioned way, not like a gray market way. I think that this industry will be bigger than anything we could possibly imagine, because it's already one of the biggest industries in the world. And so if like everybody's contribution to it is
Hmm.
actually something that they can profit from, I mean, the sky's the limit. I just can't wait to see how this stuff.
Are you surprised that this has kind of become, well, you probably aren't surprised, but you kind of were early to do this with Drive, where the NFT, um, you could play a game with an NFT. Now this is kind of,
Well, yeah. So let me talk about Drive really quickly. So Drive, to the listeners who are unaware, Drive is a collection of 111 vehicles, um, that are photography NFTs. They're all one of one. There was, I think, like 81 on sale, and then some auctions, and then there was 20 that I held back as trophies. And basically, holders of Drive can participate in these gamified experiences and creative exercises that I kind of assigned to the community. And the only way to get airdropped one of the trophy cars is to win some sort of creative game that we've developed as a community. And so we've done photo contests, derivative contests, and stuff like that. So I'm almost building like this meta game in social media, and not like an actual game where you're actually driving a car or anything. Although, in the future, who knows how far we can take this thing. But I grew up playing like Need for Speed and like all these games that are just instilled into me. And when I was bringing my art to the blockchain, I was like, you know what? I think that NFTs are primitives. They're like DNA for ideas. And so if I can put this IP out into the world and people can build worlds on top of that, then like that's how we let ideas evolve and art evolve. And that is, in a sense, definitely captures the spirit of gaming, even though the game itself is more of this metaphorical experience that we play in our online communities. So, I don't think artists have to do that, but I have a couple different outlets for my art, and so like I keep my one of one like pure street photography art on super rare, and that's kind of unattached to any obligations. But because I had this wider collection of these cars, again, identifying and collecting patterns, tapping into my evolutionary tendencies, um, it just lent itself really well to ideas around gamification. So I'm really excited about the future of that project. We're only 3 races in. Race 3 ends tomorrow. Yeah, get one of those derivatives in before tomorrow, and you might win a trophy.
I'm a drive owner myself. Aha. I think to Dave's point, what he's kind of saying there is, you know, again, cryptocurrency systems are really fascinating because they allow us to gamify things that were never really gamified. You know, you can gamify art in a really fun, unique way that doesn't even require that I physically be somewhere. Obviously, like interactive art and experimental art often has a gamification, a play element to it, an experiential element. But you with cryptocurrency systems, you can gamify finance, and we see many, many examples of that. You can gamify art, and I think this is a good thing, right? I think this is good because again, it's new ways to explore incentives. It injects fun into stale things. Nothing's really sexy about finance, outside of the context of some of the crazy stuff that happens in crypto. So I think it's a great thing, and it is refreshing for the human spirit, because it adds new levels of competitiveness, new levels of participation, reimaginings of incentives, right? New social layers. I think it's fantastic, and this is the power of games, right? Games have always had my heart because of just what they are, and I think they inject a lot of life into things, and they provide good ways to think about incentives, and good opportunities to create value too, and create shared experience. So to me, that's one of the points that I think Dave was making there that I just wanted to underscore.
And it goes so much deeper than just art too. Like, let's get back to this idea of NFTs as keys. Like, think about how many people go to a concert and save their ticket stub. What if you have a concert with 10,000 different people showing up? What if each ticket, we already have digital tickets, what if each ticket is a unique artwork? And so like you go to this show, and then you're all of a sudden automatically in this online community, a gated online community with that NFT that was your ticket. And not only did you go to the show, it's like pay to play for life. Like, you went to the show, and then 20 years later, your digital ticket is now worth 100 times, the actual cost of admission. So that experience, just by participating in the game of life, you're able to kind of end up making money and building community around that particular event. Like, there's no reason this isn't going to happen.
Yeah, there's that financial upside, but even just from I don't know if practical is the right word, but from a practical perspective, you'll be able to look back into your wallet 20 years in the future, and you were talking about the power of images before, get taken back to that day in your life that maybe you would have been more rusty on if you didn't have this sort of digital memento.
And look, if you go to a thrift store and you ask what the most expensive t-shirt they have, it's definitely a rare Led Zeppelin concert t-shirt that's not even for sale, right?
Mm-hmm.
And why is that? Because it's this piece of art that was like a proof of attendance token for this, 1977 festival, and so few of those remain that it's now this valuable artistic asset. The only difference there is that the medium is a
Yeah.
t-shirt and not an NFT. Non-fungible t-shirts.
Non-fungible t-shirts.
All right, guys, we're starting that now, or is that the next thing that we do right after this? Just start non-fungible t-shirts.
That's great. I love that. Well, gentlemen, I mean, this has been a lot of fun. I was expecting it to be just as fun as it was. So you reached the bar.
That's good.
No, you guys hit it. But we'll definitely have to have
You're at the line.
You're at the line. You're not below the line. Yeah, I love that meme. That's mine. I've just been hitting people with it when they ask me to do stuff. I'm like, and just like with the intensity of the guy Chama, just like basically like that is, but like just like you just completely serious, and I was just like, whoa,
Deadpan, completely serious.
yeah, that
One
was
of the wildest moments I think I've ever seen on Twitter. I couldn't even believe it.
oh my god, yeah, you're gonna be shocked. But it's become a meme. Anyway, where can our listeners learn more about both of you guys?
Yeah, I'm at Fitch Inverse on Twitter, FITCH, and then the word inverse. I have to remind myself what my account is now. It's been through a couple of them. You can also find what we're working on at Parallel NFT on Twitter, and really recommend just following and checking us out because we are working super hard to blow people's minds. So yeah, that's the two plugs I got.
So the main hub to find all my whole ecosystem online is my link tree, which is linktree.com/Dave Krugman. On Twitter, I'm Dave_Krugman. That's probably the best place to find me. I'm on Super Rare and OpenSea as well. But I also just love to get a quick plug in for my editorial website, which is kind of dedicated to uplifting other artists. It's called allships.co. And I just write about artists and collectors and tell the stories of the space because I really only want a platform if I can point it at others. And I think that you're only as healthy as the ecosystem that you're in. So if you focus on everyone around you and make sure everyone's good, you'll never have to ask for anything. So I direct you there as well to learn about some of the most innovative artists currently working in NFTs right now.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much again. Talk to you guys soon, and have a great
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks, Frank. Appreciate it.
The Scoop will be back with you again with another great guest. Have an amazing day, everybody.